Today's program is Josephine Baker, performing artist and hero of France. It is presented by Tom Broadhead. Tom Broadhead is the second vice president of the ATA and professor emeritus of geology at the University of Tennessee. He has collected philatelic items since childhood and has exhibited for more than 35 years. His collecting and study focuses on the philately of France and its colonies. His popular programs are informative and entertaining, and I'm expecting no less of that tonight. So with that in place, Tom, take it away.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dawn and Eric, and welcome everybody. I will start by sharing my screen. It's a pleasure to share with you a person, one of the, I think one of the greatest people of the 20th century, an incredibly talented and caring and loving woman, Josephine Baker. And I will trace her life and through philately and through ephemera. And we will end with a video recording of her singing. She was born in St. Louis, Missouri in 1906, born, and her name was Frida Josephine McDonald. The picture postcard here, which is posted in 1906, shows a marketplace in St. Louis. And so you kind of get an impression of what it would have been like at the time that she was born in 1906. In 1921, she married, at the age of 15, married a man named William Howard Baker, but soon afterwards left him for New York. As a child, she had been a very talented street performer in St. Louis and decided that she needed to pursue her dance career, what it was at that time, in a larger venue. And this is a picture postcard of Harlem in 1921. This was where she settled and became involved in performing theater. In 1921, the Court 63rd Street Theater in Harlem premiered a revue called Shuffle Along. Josephine was too young to appear in the production in New York, so she joined a roadshow where the age, her young age, was not so much of an issue. Then she returned in 1923 to New York and was able to join the chorus line of Shuffle Along. She's shown there with the blue circle, and she also appeared in a musical called Chocolate Dandies. Now, one thing you would notice from both of these show titles, they are what we would today consider to be stereotypically early 20th century African-American stereotypes. And in fact, they were. Segregation was widespread in the United States, and New York was no exception to that. So, tired of putting up with that, she moved to Paris in 1925 at the age of 19. You can imagine a young single woman taking the trip across the Atlantic. And she got there in 1925. The decorative arts, the Art Deco exposition was going. Theater was the rage. It truly was the roaring 20s. And this picture of Paris in 1925 shows all of the different theatrical performance advertisements that were everywhere. In Paris, she quickly became a star. I mean, she was considered to be exotic. Although there were mainly African colonial performers in Paris, but Josephine's athletic dancing really was remarkable. And she became very early on a star. And one of her performances was called the Danse Sauvage, which performed at the Folies Bergère, the leading venue. And she's famous for her banana skirt, which we see in the postcard at right. These were not real bananas, though. I mean, they were synthetic bananas, but the Josephine Baker commemorative stamp issued by France in 1994, we see in the vignette in the upper left, there is that same image of her with the famous banana skirt. She also became a sensation on the screen, and her first movie was a silent called La Sirène des Tropiques, the Siren of the Tropics, and she received top billing on this. And the next one in 1935, Zuzu, a talking film where that took advantage of both her dancing and vocal talent. And one thing that's really kind of interesting here, she is the star of both of these movies. She is the single person of color starring amongst an otherwise cast of white people. And in Zuzu, she actually marries the guy that is behind her. A third movie that she starred in was called Princess Tam Tam. It's about a North African princess that comes to France. And interestingly, in the US, when the 2008 vintage black cinema stamps were issued, they featured one with the movie poster of her starring in this movie, Princess Tam Tam. So there were many other performing opportunities because by this time, her vocal talents had developed further. And so she was not just a dancer, but also a singer. And she was cast in the title role of the Offenbach opera La Créole that was performed at the Theatre Marigny, which you see in the postcard here. Notably, the Theatre Marigny is right at the end of the Paris outdoor stamp bourse. So she was star of stage, screen, dance halls, opera, and movies.
Tom, excuse me, but a few people are commenting that your voice is moving in and out.
Is
If
it?
you could
Okay.
stay close to your microphone.
I will. Thank you. She returned to the U.S. To perform in 1936 and was a star in the Ziegfeld Follies. And I think one thing that's really notable here, you see some of the other people in this production, Hope, Fanny Brice, Josephine Baker, and she clearly, if you look at the all caps font of her name, clearly was the star of this, together with Fanny Brice. She returned to France and in 1937 gave up her American citizenship and became a French citizen. And part of this, though, was due to the fact that even though she got top billing in the Ziegfeld Follies, racial discrimination was still rampant, and which made things really uncomfortable for her. Well, when World War II broke out, she was living in Paris, and but not for very long. the Germans, once they occupied Paris, kind of tried to take over the scene there of performance nightclubs and so on. She continued to perform in Paris for about a year, and during that time, she sort of acted as a spy for the Allies, because the German officers would buddy up to her, and she's just like, oh, I'm just a performer, and then they talk about all kinds of things which she carefully noted and then shared with the resistance and the Allies. She also appeared among the collectible ephemera on cigarette cards. These were included in packets of cigarettes, and this is a German cigarette card of her in men's formal wear from around 1941. So she had to leave Paris for her own safety. She was advised to do that by the Allies and the resistance. And she moved to southern France to a Gothic chateau built in 1489, the Chateau de Malande. And it is an absolutely incredibly beautiful place. She continued her work on behalf of the Allied cause there, harboring refugees, members of the resistance, and was once interrogated there by the Gestapo. But again, it was like, I'm just a performer, I'm just living here. And so she was able to talk her way out of that. And at the chateau, later on, there actually was in the 1960s a temporary post office, and here's a postcard. The message at the very printed message at the bottom of the postcard on the left says that this is specially authorized by Madame Josephine Baker. The reverse side is a picture of the chateau, but here is the temporary post office postmark that exists from the chateau. Another thing, a recent acquisition, is this cover in the upper right, where it is a slogan postage meter from 1960, and it says Les Malande in the Dordogne, which was where it was located, the capital of brotherhood. Josephine and Joe Bouillon was her husband, are waiting for you, open all year. After the war, she returned to the Chateau de Milan. In the 1950s, she and Joe adopted 12 children representing different races, ethnicities, and countries. She called them the Rainbow Tribe, and she increased her performances in order to provide the necessary financial support for the 12 children. And here she is, and with Joe and with, I think, 9 of the 12. They were all very close to each other in age, and most of them are still living. Well, back to the end of World War II, and this is my most recent acquisition. 3 weeks after the end of World War II in Europe, she performed in Stuttgart in occupied Germany. And this is the program for a little careworn, a program for the performance there in Stuttgart. And her husband, Joe Bouillon, was the band leader there at this performance. And the stamp and the maximum card are French stamps honoring the Victory in Europe Day, which was May 8th, 1945. For her heroism in the war, she received the top French military honors, including the Croix de Guerre, and she was named a Chevalier of the Légion d'honneur. And these are stamps representing those two awards. She received them very proudly, and the French government really valued so much her involvement in the war, although she was told to leave France about 1942 and went to Britain afterwards because they thought she was not safe there. Well, she came back to the US occasionally to perform, but one of the most notorious events was the time that she was performing in New York in 1951 and went to the Stork Club, kind of the place to the nightclub. She was seated in a distant corner of the dining room, was largely ignored by the wait staff. And when she finally caught somebody's attention and was able to place an order, it was a long time before they brought her food, which was not well done. And she said, "I will not eat this." And she got up and walked out. And not only did she get up and walk out, but at a very nearby table, American actress Grace Kelly and a bunch of her friends were sitting, and they had taken note of what was happening with Josephine. And when she walked out, they got up and walked out. And then afterwards, there were pickets, as you can see, the NAACP organized pickets of the Stork Club because of the racial discrimination that was placed upon her. And then she returned to France. But she did return to the US in 1963. Reverend Martin Luther King invited her to speak at the March on Washington. She was the only woman who was invited to be an official speaker there. And here she is at the march with wearing her French military medals. So Josephine and Grace Kelly became very close friends after the Stork Club incident. And Josephine, incredibly generous woman, loving woman, but the performances were not as frequent or as remunerative. And it came to the point where being able to afford to stay in the chateau was just going to be impossible. And so Princess Grace then invited her to move to Monaco, where she became Josephine's patron. And the Monaco stamp here on the left is the inauguration of the Princess Grace Theater. And it features Josephine and Joe, her husband, who is also a talented violinist, and commemorates them on the same stamp. She continued to perform well into her 60s, still very much involved in performance, and more vocal than dancing, as she became older. And then the 50th anniversary of her arrival in France, a spectacular review was produced in Paris and at the Bobino Theater in 1975. It was sold out for weeks and weeks. And 4 days after the opening, she suffered a stroke and died on April 12th at the age of 68. These are photos of her at the age of 68 with that amazing, these headdresses were huge and sometimes very heavy. But I was very fortunate to find online an original program from this production. I think they might not be that rare, because when you consider that they would have printed huge numbers of them, anticipating all of the the weeks and weeks of sold out performances. So there might be boxes of them sitting around, but it really is incredible, and a lot of photographs of her in it, and a real tribute to the performance, the artistry that she shared with the French people. She received a full military funeral at the Church of the Madeleine, shown at the lower right. And this is the steps, the crowd at the funeral on the lower left. The funeral procession passed the theater where she had performed just days earlier. And you can see at the Bobino, there's her headline for this incredible review that had been created just for her. She received a state funeral also in Monaco, which had been her home since 1968. And she was buried in the St. Charles Church in Monaco, together with her husband and music director, Joe Bouillon. And in the photo on the left, you can see Princess Grace at the head of the group coming out of the church. And then on the right that's the grave for her and Joe. So only last year, the French government approved a plan to inter her remains in the Pantheon. And this is the monument to France's greatest luminaries and heroes. And it is really quite an amazing place. Voltaire is buried there. A lot of these are reinterments. After it was created, they began moving people into it. But you really had to be really quite an extraordinary personage in order to be to receive a burial in the Pantheon. And the Pantheon has appeared on some postal stationery and also recently on a stamp. So this was really quite a wonderful thing, wonderful recognition for her to be reinterred in the Pantheon. And a souvenir block of stamps on a souvenir card was issued to commemorate this particular event, and it was produced, obviously, in advance, or to be ready on the day on November 30th, 2021. And one thing I'll point out is on the left at the upper right, the script says, "Je deux amours, mon pays et Paris." And that was her signature song, which I will share with you later. I have two loves, my land and Paris. So her two loves were America and Paris. Well, Baker's family, actually one of her sons said, no, we don't want her, disinterred in Monaco and moved to Paris. And so instead, what they did was they created a casket that carried soil from places that she had lived: St. Louis, Paris, Monaco, the chateau. And the images at the top are images of the ceremony on November 30th, 2021, they had a light exposition of pictures of her on the front, projected on the front of the Pantheon. The middle picture is shows the military guard beginning to carry the casket into the Pantheon. On the right is the arrival of the military guard with the casket containing the ceremonial soil. And President Macron spoke at the interment of the soil representing her. So then down below, the cover, the first day cover, shows one of the stamps, shows two of the images from the stamps, the Pantheon, and a commemorative cancel of November 30th, 2021. So that's the history. And now I want to go to some things that are more strictly philatelic, although there was some philately in the history. In 1994, a semi-postal stamp was issued with her image, as I mentioned, with the banana dress, banana skirt. It paid the domestic letter rate for a 20-gram letter. These things are hard to find on like ordinary mail. They are, I have one domestic, and then I have in the lower left, that's actually a domestic one. It's from French Guiana, but that's local postage. And it's a couple of years later. But there were lots of cachets, different maximum cards, and really some exquisite commemorations of her. The other thing I would note is that the cancel is in the form of a record disc with the spindle hole in the middle. So that stamp also appeared at the same time as a booklet pane with stamps featuring other French performing artists. And at the top is, on the left, is the complete pane, and below that is the cover for the booklet pane. And then below that is a first day cover, cachet cover of the booklet pane. This is another one that, you know, I have not seen for sure an example of the booklet single on any kind of commercial mail, and only recently bought this example in the upper right. And you can tell that it's from the booklet pane because it has the selvage below and above the stamp. And that's really the only way to distinguish between the stamp from the booklet and the stamp from the sheet. So there were also philatelic documents. You know, France is really big on these, and with some wonderful explanatory text, and notably the large sheet at left. I've enlarged it has a printed engraved image of her from the stamp in black, together with the stamp and the first day. So these are again the 4 2021 stamps denominated at the Forever International rate, and they show photos representing different times of her life. In the lower left, we have the recently arrived in France performer look, and then in the upper left is the image that also I had on a cigarette card. That's from the 1930s, actually. Then we have the military image in the upper right, and an image of from the 1950s or 60s in the lower right. Well, there are also souvenirs, and some of them are a little unusual. The two banknotes at the left, those are souvenirs. In fact, it says at the bottom, Euro souvenir. So these are look like Euro banknotes, but they have no value. And they were produced with an image, a probably 1960s, 70s image of her performing, and then the beautiful image of her in her military uniform. And then we have the 2021 stamp, and we have the 1994 stamp on those. Notably also, these are not postal cancels. They are text cancels, so there is no date on them. Another souvenir that I have come across recently is the stamp in the upper right from Equatorial Guinea. It is part of a series of stamps with roses, and this is one named after her. But this is not, although there are a lot of stamps from Equatorial Guinea in 1976 that are mentioned in the Scott catalog, the roses are not. So that's something that I'm going to have to look into further, maybe look in Mickle or another catalog. And then there was a souvenir medal created and dated November 30th, 2021 to commemorate the interment in the Pantheon. And as I mentioned, Jadou's Amour, that was really her signature song. And here is the English translation of it. My country, although she doesn't mention it as the US, it is. But it really is, you know, she mentions Paris a lot more. And here is a piece of sheet music that I've acquired of Jadou's Amour. And you can only imagine her standing there singing this beautiful song. And so now I will share that with you. With a mention of ATA. And, you know, I know all of you are dedicated topical and thematic philatelists, but don't forget, you know, spread the good word. And I'm going to, we'll see how this goes. We're going to, I'm going to have to stop share because I forgot to turn on the audio.
Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us for, this was one of the best programs that we've had.